The distress call. The Deep Space Monitoring Station orbiting Mars hummed with quiet activity as Dr. Lisa Cole adjusted her headset for the third time that morning. Another routine shift watching the void between stars, listening for signals that never came. Earth had been broadcasting into space for decades, hoping to find others among the stars. So far, only silence had answered back. Captain Mark Ross floated nearby, reviewing supply reports on his tablet. The former Navy commander had volunteered for this assignment when Earth Defense Force established the monitoring station 2 years ago. Most days, nothing happened. Today felt different. "Captain," Lisa called out, her voice tight with excitement. "I'm picking up something strange on the long-range sensors." Mark pushed off the wall and drifted over to her station. The main screen showed wave patterns dancing across the display. "What kind of something?" "It's artificial. Definitely not natural radio waves or stellar radiation." Lisa's fingers flew across her controls, adjusting filters and amplifying the signal. The pattern repeats every 47 seconds. "This is intelligent communication." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Other technicians gathered around Lisa's station as she worked to clean up the transmission. Static filled the speakers. Then slowly, impossibly, words began to emerge. "Help ... anyone. Peaceful traders ... under attack ... Mark felt his heart race. First contact. After all these years of wondering if humanity was alone, the answer was broadcasting directly to them. "Can you get more of it?" Lisa nodded, sweat beading on her forehead as she concentrated. The signal was weak, probably traveling vast distances through space. "The transmission is coming from the Vega system. That's about 25 light years away." More words came through the static. "Ship damaged. Crew dying ... we are called. Gentle ones ... pirates attacking without mercy." The voice sounded desperate, alien, but somehow familiar in its fear. Mark had heard that same tone from sailors whose ships were sinking in storms. Universal distress knew no species. Pirates? One of the technicians whispered, "There are space pirates?" The transmission continued, growing weaker. "If anyone receives this, we tried to trade in peace. They kill for pleasure. Warn others. Beware the red claw ... double quotes, then silence." The signal died completely. Mark stared at the empty screen, his mind racing. Somewhere in space, an alien species was under attack. They called themselves the Gentle Ones, which suggested exactly what it sounded like. Peaceful merchants being slaughtered by pirates. "Send everything to Earth Command immediately," he ordered. "Priority Alpha transmission." Within hours, Admiral Tom Blake was reviewing the recording in his office beneath the Colorado mountains. The gray-haired veteran had spent 40 years in Earth's military, fighting in conflicts across the globe. But this was different. This was bigger than any human war. "How long ago was this sent?" Blake asked over the video link. "Based on the signal decay, approximately 6 months," Lisa reported from Mars Station. "Captain, if we're going to help them, we need to move fast." Blake was quiet for a long moment. Earth had 3 destroyers capable of interstellar travel, along with 1 medical ship. It wasn't much of a fleet, but it was what they had. More importantly, it was what those aliens needed. "Captain Ross, I'm authorizing a rescue mission to the Vega system. Take the destroyers Phoenix, Ranger, and Liberty. Medical ship Mercy goes with you. If there are survivors, bring them home." Mark felt a surge of purpose he hadn't experienced since leaving the Navy. "Understood, Admiral. What about first contact protocols?" "Throw the book out the window," Blake replied grimly. "These aren't negotiations or cultural exchanges. This is a rescue mission. You find those Gentle Ones, you save whoever you can, and you'll learn everything possible about these Red Claw pirates. Yes, sir. How long do we have to prepare? 72 hours. The world leaders are meeting tomorrow to discuss this, but I'm not waiting for politicians to debate while aliens die in space. Mark nodded. In 3 days, humanity would launch its first interstellar rescue mission. They were about to announce to the galaxy that Earth stood ready to help those who couldn't help themselves. He just hoped they weren't too late. Asterisk first contact. And horror 6 months later, the human fleet dropped out of warp at the edge of the Vega system. Captain Mark Ross stood on the bridge of the destroyer Phoenix, staring at the massive shape drifting in the darkness ahead. The alien vessel was enormous, easily 3 times the size of Earth's largest ships, but it hung dead in space without any signs of life. Scanning now, Captain, reported Lieutenant Dan Webb from his sensor station. The ship is badly damaged. Hull breaches on multiple decks. No power signatures, but I'm detecting faint life signs in the center sections. Mark felt a mix of hope and dread. After traveling for half a year, they had found survivors. But the ship looked like it had been through hell. Commander Hayes, prepare your Marines for boarding operations. Full environmental suits. Commander Pete Hayes nodded grimly. The veteran Marine had volunteered for this mission specifically because it involved helping others. His team was ready for anything, or so they thought. The boarding shuttle approached the alien ship carefully. Up close, the damage was even worse. Massive holes had been burned through the hull by weapons fire. Sections of the ship had been torn apart, debris floating in small clouds around the vessel. Jesus, whispered one of the Marines as they entered through an emergency airlock. What kind of monsters did this? Inside, the ship was a tomb. The corridors were wide and tall, designed for beings much larger than humans. But everywhere they looked, there were signs of violence. Blast marks on the walls. Strange dark stains on the floor that could only be blood. Equipment smashed and scattered. Mark's team followed the life signs deeper into the ship, using portable lights to navigate the dark passages. The alien architecture was beautiful, with flowing curves and organic shapes that suggested a peaceful, artistic culture. The destruction felt like vandalism in a cathedral. They found the survivors in what appeared to be a medical bay. 12 beings huddled together in the only section still maintaining life support. Mark stopped breathing when he saw them. The aliens were magnificent. They stood nearly 9 feet tall, with thick, muscular bodies covered in short, gray fur. Their faces were gentle despite their size, with large, kind eyes that looked ancient and wise. They moved slowly, carefully, like everything they did was considered and peaceful. One of them, clearly the eldest, approached the humans cautiously. When it spoke, a translation device around its neck converted the words to English. "Are you the ones who sent the rescue signal?" The alien asked, hope flickering in its voice. "We received your distress call," Mark replied, removing his helmet to show his face. "I am Captain Mark Ross of Earth. We came to help." The elder alien's eyes filled with what could only be tears. "I am Elder Neem of the Keth people. We ... We had given up hope. You are the first to answer our call in 6 months. How many of you were there originally?" Commander Hayes asked gently. 3,000, Nim replied, his voice breaking. "Families, children, elders. We were traveling to the Centauri markets to trade our art and music. We harm no one. We carry no weapons." Mark felt something cold settle in his stomach. What happened to the others? Nim gestured for them to follow. He led the humans to another section of the ship, where bodies had been carefully arranged and covered with colorful cloths. Even in death, the Keth maintained their dignity and respect for life. "The Red Claw came without warning," Nim explained. "They demanded our cargo, but when we offered to give it freely, They laughed. Their leader said they had not come for trade. They had come to hunt. Hunt? Mark's voice was barely a whisper. They killed for sport, Captain Ross. They separated families and forced parents to watch their children die. They made gains of our suffering. When they finally left, they took only a small portion of our goods. The rest they destroyed, so we could not trade even if we survived. Commander Hayes clenched his fists inside his suit. How long did this go on? 3 days, Nim replied. 3 days of horror. They could have killed us all in minutes, but they wanted to make it last. They broadcast the slaughter to other ships, laughing as they worked. The Marine commander had seen combat in multiple wars, but this was different. This was pure evil, killing for the joy of killing. Elder Nim, we're going to get you and your people to safety. But I need to ask, is this normal in your galaxy? Do the strong always prey on the weak like this? Nim's expression grew infinitely sad. Yes, Captain Hayes, the Red Claw control dozens of systems. They take what they want and kill whom they please. Peaceful species like mine exist only because we are useful for trade. When we are no longer useful, we are eliminated, and no one fights back? Mark asked. Who would fight for us? We build art, we compose music, we grow food. We know nothing of war. The warrior species either join the Red Claw or are destroyed by them. The galaxy belongs to those who take pleasure in violence. Mark looked at his Marines, seeing the same cold anger in their eyes that was building in his chest. The Keth were everything humanity aspired to be: peaceful, wise, artistic. And they were being slaughtered by monsters who killed for entertainment. Elder Nim, Mark said quietly, you're under Earth's protection now. All of you. We're going to take you home, treat your wounded, and help you contact any other survivors of your people. You are kind, Captain Ross, but you do not understand. The Red Claw will come for you now. They always hunt down those who aid their victims. Your world will suffer because you tried to help us. Mark smiled grimly, and for the first time, Elder Nim saw something in the human's eyes that made him step back. It wasn't cruelty or madness. It was something far more dangerous, controlled, righteous fury. Let them come, Mark said softly. They're about to learn what happens when you threaten Earth's friends. Asterisk Earth's decision and preparation. The images reached Earth 3 weeks later, transmitted by Captain Ross from the medical ship Mercy, as it carried the Keth survivors home. Admiral Blake sat in the emergency session of the Global Defense Council, watching the recordings with growing horror and rage. On the main screen, Elder Nim told his story again for Earth's leaders. The alien's gentle voice described 3 days of systematic torture and murder, while the camera showed the covered bodies of an entire civilization's worth of peaceful beings. Turn it off, whispered President Maria Santos after 20 minutes. We've seen enough. The room fell silent. 50 of Earth's most powerful leaders sat in stunned quiet, processing what they had witnessed. These were people who had seen war, famine, and natural disasters. But this was different. This was evil on a scale that challenged their understanding of the universe. General Kate Stone, the military strategist who had planned Earth's defense for 2 decades, spoke first. We have to respond to this. We can't let this stand. With what? Asked Prime Minister David Chun. We have 3 destroyers and a medical ship. Elder Nim said the Red Claw controls dozens of systems. They could have hundreds of ships. Admiral. Blake stood up slowly, his weathered face hard as granite. Dr. Bob Chun has been analyzing the wreckage from the Keth ship. Bob, tell them what you found. Dr. Chun activated his presentation, and technical diagrams filled the screen. The Red Claw weapons are powerful but crude. Plasma-based energy. Weapons, standard kinetic projectiles. Their ship armor is thick but basic metal alloys. And President Santos prompted. Our weapons are better, Dr. Chun said simply. Much better. Our nuclear torpedoes would cut through their hulls like paper. Our railguns fire projectiles at speeds they can't match. Our defensive systems are more advanced than anything we've seen from their technology. How is that possible? Asked General Stone. They've never faced real opposition, Blake answered. Think about it. For generations, they've been fighting peaceful species who don't fight back, or primitive civilizations with basic weapons. They've never needed to innovate, never needed to improve. They've grown lazy and overconfident. Dr. Chon nodded. Earth developed weapons through centuries of warfare against equals. We had to constantly improve or die. The Red Claw never faced that pressure. The room buzzed with quiet conversations as the implications sank in. Earth might actually be able to fight these monsters and win. Even if we can win battles, said Finance Minister Lisa Park, we're talking about one world against a galactic empire. The numbers are impossible. Are they? Admiral Blake pulled up a star chart showing Red Claw territory. Intelligence from the Keth survivors shows us their structure. They control through fear, not loyalty. Most of their subject species hate them, but are too afraid to rebel. If we start winning battles, how long before others join us? President Santos leaned forward. Admiral, are you seriously suggesting we go to war with an interstellar empire? I'm suggesting we do what we've always done when innocent people are being murdered, Blake replied. We stop the murderers. The question isn't whether we should act. The question is whether we can live with ourselves if we don't. Over the next 6 hours, the debate raged across every major government on Earth. But by evening, the decision was unanimous. The images of the Keth massacre had been broadcast worldwide, and humanity's response was swift and unified. Protests filled the streets of every major city. But these weren't protests against war. They were demands for justice. Signs reading "Justice for the Keth" and "Stop the Red Claw" appeared in dozens of languages. For the first time in decades, the entire human species was united behind a single cause. The industrial mobilization began immediately. Every shipyard on Earth and in orbit started working around the clock. Old nuclear submarines were retrofitted with space drives and enhanced armor. New destroyer designs rolled off assembly lines that had been converted from civilian manufacturing in record time. Dr. Chun led teams of scientists in developing new weapons specifically designed to counter Red Claw technology. Kinetic bombardment, systems that could crack planets, plasma cannons that could melt through their thick armor, nuclear missiles upgraded with alien-derived targeting systems provided by grateful Keth survivors. Stone coordinated the largest military buildup in human history. Marine units trained for zero-gravity combat. Pilots learned to fly in three-dimensional space battles. Tacticians studied every piece of intelligence the Keth could provide about Red Claw bases and ship designs. Elder Nim and his surviving people watched this mobilization with amazement. They had never seen anything like humanity's response to injustice. The Keth had accepted their fate as victims, but humans refused to accept that anyone should suffer as they had. Captain Ross, Nim said during one of their strategy sessions, your people are preparing for a war that could destroy your world. Why do you risk everything for strangers you barely know? Mark looked up from the tactical displays he was studying. He had been promoted to Fleet Admiral for the coming campaign, commanding Earth's largest space fleet in history. 200 ships and 50,000 personnel, all volunteers who had demanded the chance to fight for justice. Because it's the right thing to do, Mark answered simply. On Earth, we have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We've done nothing for too long. But you could be safe, Nim pressed. Your world is far from Red Claw territory. You could hide, defend. Yourselves if they come. Why seek this fight? Admiral Blake joined the conversation, carrying a tablet with the latest fleet status reports. Elder Nim, I want to show you something. He pulled up video feeds from Earth's major cities, showing the memorials that had been built for the Keth victims. Flowers, candles, and artwork covered entire city blocks. Children drew pictures of the gentle aliens they had never met but wanted to honor. 3,000 of your people died, Blake said quietly, but 8 billion humans carry their memory. Now, we don't fight for strangers, Elder Nim. We fight for family. And your people became our family the moment you asked for help. Nim's large eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of hope rather than sorrow. In 6 months, humanity would launch the largest military campaign in galactic history. They would carry with them the hopes of every enslaved species and the memory of every innocent life lost to Red Claw cruelty. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity's protective instincts were awakened. The Red Claw had made their greatest mistake when they ignored that distress. Call and assumed no one would answer. Someone had answered. And they were coming with the full fury of a species that had never learned to ignore the cries of the innocent. Asterisk. The hunt begins. Fleet Admiral Mark Ross stood on the bridge of the flagship Vengeance as 200 human warships dropped out of warp at the edge of Red Claw territory. The massive fleet hung in the darkness like avenging angels, their weapons charged and ready for the hunt that was about to begin. First target is the mining station at Proxima 7, reported Captain Amy Ford from her stealth ship Scout. Intelligence shows they're using slave labor from 12 different species. Estimated garrison of 50 Red Claw ships. Mark nodded grimly. They had planned this campaign carefully. Rather than strike directly at the Red Claw homeworld, they would systematically dismantle the Empire piece by piece, freeing slaves and gathering intelligence as they went. All ships commence Operation Liberation, Mark ordered. Remember, our mission is to free the innocent and destroy the guilty. No Red Claw ship escapes to warn others. The human fleet moved with precision that surprised even themselves. Months of training and preparation had turned Earth's volunteers into a deadly fighting force. Stealth ships scouted ahead while destroyers positioned themselves for maximum tactical advantage. Asterisk. The Red Claw never saw them coming. The battle at Proxima 7 lasted exactly 14 minutes. Human nuclear torpedoes tore through Red Claw hulls like they were made of paper. Railgun projectiles moving at incredible speeds punched clean through multiple enemy ships. The pirates' plasma weapons couldn't even penetrate human shields. War Chief Grack watched the battle reports from his command ship deep in Red Claw space. The massive alien stood 8 feet tall, his scarred hide covered in the bones and teeth of victims from 100 different worlds. He had ruled through fear and violence for 30 years, and no one had ever challenged his authority. 50 ships destroyed? Grack snarled at his communications officer. How many of these new enemies did we kill in return? The smaller alien cowered before his master's rage. None, War Chief. They suffered no losses. The freed slaves say the attackers called themselves humans. Humans? Grack had never heard the name before. In his experience, any species capable of space travel was either already conquered or had joined the Red Claw willingly. Where do they come from? Unknown, War Chief. The slaves say they came to free the innocent and punish the guilty. Grack laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Another species of fools who think they can police the galaxy. Send 3 battle groups to hunt them down. I want their heads mounted in my trophy room. But Admiral Ross had other plans. Over the next 2 months, the human fleet struck 12 more Red Claw installations. Each battle was a massacre, but not in the way anyone expected. Human tactics, developed through centuries of warfare, proved devastatingly effective against pirates who had never faced real opposition. At the slave markets of Vega Prime, human marines stormed the facilities while their ships destroyed the orbital defenses. They found thousands of aliens from dozens of species, all branded with red claw marks and living in conditions that made hardened soldiers weep with rage. "We're here to take you home," Commander Pete Hayes told a group of rescued aliens who looked like giant butterflies. "You're safe now. The red claw will never hurt you again." One of the butterfly aliens, barely more than a child, approached Hayes cautiously. "Are you truly here to help? The red claw said no one would ever come for us." Hayes knelt down to the alien child's level, his voice gentle despite the fury burning in his eyes. "Little one, we came from very far away just to find you. My species made a promise to all peaceful beings in the galaxy. We will protect you from those who want to hurt you." Word began to spread through the underground networks that connected oppressed species across Red Claw territory. The impossible was happening. Someone was fighting back, and they were winning at a Fortress Moon, protecting a Red Claw breeding facility for combat slaves. The humans arrived to find the most horrific sight yet. Alien children were being trained as weapons, their natural, peaceful instincts beaten out of them until they became killers. "Burn it all," Admiral Ross ordered after seeing the training camps. "Every building, every facility. Make sure nothing remains that could ever be used to hurt children again." The fortress burned for 3 days. The human fleet saved over 10,000 alien children and returned them to their families. But more importantly, they sent a message that echoed across the galaxy. The Deathworlders protected the innocent. Captain Ford's stealth ships brought back intelligence that changed everything. The Red Claw Empire was not as united as it appeared. Most subject species served only because they were terrified. Many maintained secret resistance movements, waiting for someone strong enough to lead them in rebellion. "War Chief Grack has sent his 3 best battle groups to hunt us," Ford reported during a strategy meeting. "Each group has over 100 ships. They're converging on our position from 3 different directions." "Perfect," Admiral Ross smiled coldly. "Time to show them what human tactics really look like." The Battle of the Nexus became legend throughout the galaxy. War Chief Grack's 3 battle groups, each individually larger than the entire human fleet, arrived at the coordinates expecting to crush the upstart humans between them. Instead, they flew into a carefully prepared trap. Human ships had been positioned using 3-dimensional thinking that the Red Claw couldn't comprehend. While the pirates thought in terms of simple frontal assaults, humans used complex maneuvers that struck from unexpected angles. Nuclear mines, deployed days earlier, detonated in perfect sequence to break the Red Claw formations. Railgun barrages, from concealed positions, destroyed entire squadrons before they could react. And when the pirates tried to retreat, they found human ships waiting at every escape route. In 4 hours, 300 Red Claw warships were reduced to expanding clouds of plasma and debris. Not a single human ship was lost. Across the galaxy, oppressed species watched the battle recordings in amazement. The mighty Red Claw, terror of 1,000 worlds, had been crushed by beings they had never heard of. War Chief Grack received the news in stunned silence. His 3 best commanders were dead. 900 ships and their entire crews had been eliminated. And still, no one knew anything about these humans except that they claimed to protect the innocent. For the first time in 30 years of conquest and murder, Grack felt something he had never experienced before: fear. On the flagship Vengeance, Admiral Ross addressed his fleet as they prepared for the final phase of their campaign. "We came here to answer a distress call," he said. "We found a galaxy with a strong prey on the weak, where peaceful beings live in terror, and where monsters rule through fear. That ends now. We're going to the Red Claw homeworld, and we're going to finish this. The human fleet turned toward the heart of Red Claw space, carrying with them the hopes of 1 billion enslaved souls and the promise of justice for the gentle. Keth, who had started it all. Asterisk Deathworlders' wrath, the Red Claw homeworld of Dakros hung. Before the human fleet, like a diseased tumor in space. Massive orbital stations bristled with weapons, while planetary shields shimmered around the surface. This was the heart of an empire built on suffering, and it was about to face judgment. Fleet. Admiral Mark Ross studied the tactical displays, showing the strongest defenses in Red Claw space. 500 enemy ships guarded the approaches to Dakros. Orbital platforms the size of cities waited to rain fire on any approaching fleet. It was a fortress that had never been challenged. War Chief Grack isn't taking any chances, reported Captain Amy Ford from her scout ship. He's recalled every available vessel from across his territory. This is everything he has left. Good, Ross replied coldly. We won't have to hunt down the survivors later. But the humans were not alone. Over the past months, their victories had inspired something the galaxy had never seen before. A unified rebellion of the oppressed. Ships from 24 liberated species had joined the human fleet, their crews eager to strike back at their former tormentors. Captain Joe Miller stood ready at the bombardment control station, his fingers hovering over the kinetic weapon systems. The former artillery officer had volunteered specifically for this moment, the chance to rain justice on those who tortured innocents for pleasure. All ships, this is Admiral Ross, Mark announced to the combined fleet. Today we end the Red Claw Empire forever. Today we prove that evil will not be tolerated while good beings draw breath. Today we keep the promise we made to Elder Nim, and every innocent soul who suffered under these monsters. The battle began with a massive kinetic bombardment that lit up Dakros' orbital defenses like dying stars. Tungsten rods moving at incredible velocity smashed through shields and armor that had never been breached. Ancient orbital stations, symbols of Red Claw power for generations, cracked apart and tumbled toward the planet below. War Chief Grack watched from his command bunker, deep beneath the planet's surface, as his mighty fleet engaged the humans in desperate battle. For 30 years, he had been the apex predator of the galaxy. Nothing had ever challenged his authority or questioned his right to take whatever he wanted. Now his ships were dying by the dozens. Human tactics, refined through centuries of warfare against equals, proved devastatingly effective against forces that had grown lazy through easy victories. Every maneuver the Red Claw attempted, the humans had already anticipated and countered. Send the slave armies, Grack snarled to his remaining commanders. Every species we've conquered, throw them at the humans. Let them die buying us time. But something incredible happened. As the slave armies deployed from their barracks, they turned their weapons on their Red Claw overseers instead of the human fleet. The rebellion that had been building across the galaxy finally erupted on Dakros itself. Elder Nim, now serving as a liaison between the human fleet and the liberated species, watched the slave revolt with tears of joy streaming down his gentle face. They're fighting back, he whispered to Admiral Ross. After all these years of suffering in silence, they're finally fighting back. They just needed someone to show them it was possible, Ross replied. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand up and say, no more. Human Marines landed on Dakros in massive assault craft, fighting through the burning cities toward the Red Claw strongholds. Commander Pete Hayes led his troops through the twisted architecture of a civilization built on cruelty, past monuments to genocide and trophies made from the bones of peaceful species. In the fortress factories, where alien children had been turned into weapons, human soldiers found horrors that hardened veterans struggled to comprehend. But they also found something beautiful. the children recognizing their liberators and running toward them with hope instead of fear. "We're taking you home," Hayes told a group of young aliens who had been trained as killers since birth. "All of you. You're never going to hurt anyone, and no one is ever going to hurt you again." A final battle raged in Grak's personal stronghold, a massive structure built from the wreckage of peaceful worlds. The war chief himself stood at the center of his trophy room, surrounded by the skulls and artifacts of 1,000 murdered civilizations. When Admiral Ross and his Marines breached the chamber, they found Grak waiting with his personal guard, the most vicious killers in Red Claw space. But even these hardened monsters seemed small and pathetic compared to the cold fury radiating from the human soldiers who had seen what they had done to innocents. The fight lasted less than 5 minutes. Grak's guards, used to terrorizing the helpless, crumbled before opponents who fought with discipline, tactics, and righteous anger. The war chief himself, stripped of his victims and his power, proved to be nothing more than a coward who had built his empire on the suffering of those who couldn't fight back. "You cannot kill me," Grak gasped as Ross stood over his fallen form. "I am war chief of the Red Claw. I am the terror of 100 systems." "No," Ross replied quietly. "You were a bully who hurt children and killed families for fun, and now you're nothing at all." The trial of War Chief Grak became the most watched event in galactic history. Representatives from every species that had suffered under Red Claw rule gathered to witness justice finally served. The gentle Keth, the artistic butterfly people, the scholarly crystal beings, all the peaceful species who had lived in terror for generations, watched as their tormentor faced judgment. Elder Nim himself delivered the final testimony, his voice carrying the pain of 3,000 murdered family members and the hope of freedom finally achieved. "He took everything from us," Nim said. "Our loved ones, our peace, our hope for the future. But he could not take our memory, and he could not prevent justice from finding him." The sentence was exile to a barren moon where Grak would live alone with his thoughts and the ghosts of his victims. Death would have been too merciful for someone who had caused such suffering. With the Red Claw leadership destroyed and their empire in ruins, the human fleet established peacekeeping stations throughout former pirate territory. Admiral Ross addressed the galaxy from the Bridge of the Vengeance, his words broadcast to every world capable of receiving them. "To all peaceful species in the galaxy, Earth stands ready to defend you. To all who would prey on the innocent, we are watching, and we will find you. To all who suffer under tyranny, help is coming. This is humanity's promise to the stars." In the months that followed, distress calls began reaching Earth from across the galaxy. Species that had suffered in silence for generations finally dared to ask for help, knowing that someone would answer. Elder Neem stood beside Admiral Ross as they watched the first convoy of Keth refugees returning to their home system, escorted by human warships that would ensure their safety. "Your people changed. Everything," Nim said softly. "In 1 year, you did what we thought impossible for 1,000 generations. You made the galaxy safe for the gentle." "We just kept a promise," Ross replied. "When someone calls for help, Earth answers. That's what we do." The galaxy had learned a new truth. There were beings among the stars who would cross any distance, face any enemy, and sacrifice anything to protect the innocent. They called themselves humans, but others knew them by a different name. The Deathworlders had awakened, and they would never sleep while evil walked among the stars. Asterisk.